When I was 6, my family owned a fair bit of land around one of the most popular springs in the area. As long as my mom or dad came with me, I was free to trot off into the woods. But one day, my dad is home and off we go. Mostly, I just ran around, burning off my little kid energy. The trees weren't dense, probably about 10 feet between them, but there were a lot of trees and a lot of dead leaves covering the ground, and that haze you get whenever you're deep in the woods. Well, I wind up getting lost. I'm somewhere on our land I don't recognize. There's trees and leaves far as the eye can see, and the ground is littered in old, rusted wheels, a bed frame, and other various garbage, in no particular order, and I had to have been there a while. Being 6, I do the logical thing and freak out, starting to cry and scream for my dad. After a minute of this, I hear him shout, "Hold on, don't move." I just keep crying. I'm on my way. A few seconds pass. I'm still shouting, then I hear him say, from what I think is a different direction, "I'm right over here. Follow my voice." A few seconds later, almost there, just hold on. And then again, a few seconds later, "I'm right over here. Just come here." This goes on for about a minute, and I break down even more because to me, he's telling me two separate things, and I just curl up and cry. He linebackers his way into view, grabs me by the arm, and pulls me up. I'm not hurried away or anything. He just calms me down a bit, and then we walk off. I tell him he shouldn't have kept telling me to come to him after saying to stay there, and he tells me he never said that, and that if you're lost in the woods and you're someone else, the best thing to do is to stay put so they can find you. It was never brought up again. Then, when I was in middle school, I was friends with a kid who had an unusual house. For starters, it had a basement. This is effectively considered a bad move in the state of Florida. Weirder yet, cell phones didn't work inside his house at all. And the second you stepped outside to his front porch or side porch, boom, all your signal was back. Anywhere outside, but his place was cool and it was built next to an old dried up riverbed. It was super fun to play on it since it was all his parents' property. Naturally, we stayed friends through high school, and his place became the de facto hangout spot for the majority of us. Despite the cell phone weirdness, it got significantly creepier, however, once the red eyes started appearing. You see, his house was a little couple hundred feet from a major highway, but there were just enough trees to dampen the noise of most vehicles, and when most of us had our license and started to spend erotic weekends there, the red eyes showed up. Two evenly spaced, small crimson colored lights that would just appear on the property, often just on the other side of the fence from where we parked, on the very edge of where its floodlights reached. They would linger for a few seconds, abruptly go out, and then appear elsewhere, usually 10 or so feet away, maybe at a different height. And they would do this for apparently random amount of time and eventually just disappear. They were bright enough that I once decided on the spot I was going home in the morning because I got to his front door and saw them staring at the house through the windshield of my car. That made everyone that saw them nervous and fearful. A couple of my buddies bravely went out at night to try and figure out what it was. I did not go with them, but there were four of them. Probably half an hour later, me and someone else were sitting on the porch getting some fresh air and drinking sodas when they came screaming out of the woods, and rather than take the set of gates, just jumped the fence immediately. What I was told was that they got just out of sight of the house and was sweeping the area when, as a group, they suddenly felt watched. They heard something rustling through the leaves, and a bamboo cluster began to rattle. They swept the light over the area around them to try and see something, but nothing showed up. Suddenly, part of the cluster just bent and broke, so they hightailed it out of there. They finished relaying the story, and of course, we're calling bullshit on them before the guy sitting with me gets up to look out in the woods. There, burning brightly, is that same damn pair of crimson eyes staring at the house, and then they blank out and come back on, heading towards the gate. Naturally, we go back inside. We still don't know what caused them, and as a collective, we've seen them probably around 100 times on and off, with different groups of people, so the makeup of people was never quite the same. His dad was adamant it was taillights from the road that went through those woods, but we didn't really buy that because we've been to that road. It's a bridge over the gap where the river used to be, and to easily get there, you had to follow the riverbed, because the trees and vines are denser than it's worth going around them. Even then, it's a 20-ish minute hike to a large fence at the height of the bridge. You have to scale another couple hundred feet to the bridge itself. There's no way you'd ever see the light of anything that far out, and even if you did, it would be on and off flickering, not what we saw though. The closest answer I've got is an obscure Floridian spirit known as the Red Eyes or Old Red Eye, depending on the tale. It's considered something that was made up recently The story, depending on the title, gives that the lights are the eyes of a spirit that was either a Native American or an escaped slave/conductor along the Underground Railroad. They were tasked with helping others of their kind escape, and were a sort of lookout for hostile patrolmen in the area, and were, if they encountered them, supposed to lure them away or scare them off the trail that was to be used. A last-ditch effort was to kill them if necessary. Needless to say, the ghost was one of these people that died during their duty and now haunted the area they died in. And if you don't give them the password or safe word to gesture, they get more and more aggressive until eventually they have no choice but to kill you. One night when I was 6 years old, I woke up for no reason. No sound, no nightmare, nothing. I looked around my room, dimly lit by my nightlight in my room, and the one in the hallway. I saw my toys scattered around the room, and the stuffed leopard at the end of my bed. Nothing out of the ordinary inside, but outside my window was a different story. A man, loosely gray skin hanging off atrophied muscles and bones, wrapped in an almost black blueless robe. A long finger croaked on the glass, pointing at me, mouth agape, revealing darkness that matched the darkness of the moonless sky behind him. But what scared me the most, that were his eyes were blank, pale, almost with a light purple hue to them. If he had pupils, they most certainly would be directed at me. The window fogged and unfogged with his breath. I looked back with such a force that I moved my bed away from the wall, and I fell between the two. I made such a ruckus that my father came into my room within seconds to see what was going on. I could see the man's hand and crooked finger from under my bed. By the time my dad pulled me up from my place, the figure had disappeared. No residential fog from his breath, no smudge from his finger. I frantically told my dad about the man. He insisted that I was experiencing was sleep paralysis and that it had run its course. He let me sleep between him and my mom that night, sometime only reserved for the scariest of nightmares. As the years went by, I forgot about him mostly. Every once in a while, I would have a dream about him, really only when I was sick with the flu. It wasn't until I was 17 that I saw him again. At that age, I was very adventurous. During the summer when I was free, I would spend most of my days and many nights in the mountains that are scattered around the Pacific Northwest. I went to the North Cascades for a 2-night backpacking trip up to Gothic Basin, a 4.6-mile hike up with a 2,840 foot elevation gain, a pretty standard hike with a beautiful glacier lake to end it. I unpacked and set up my site for the night, and ended with a meal of spam and peanut butter crackers. In the middle of the night, I had to go to the bathroom. I usually held it till morning because I don't like to leave the tent during the night. I had to go bad. I pulled on my boots and unzipped my tent. As I looked my head down, I was met with a pair of bony feet. The metatarsals protruded under the skin, the nails curled, and the archers flat. I don't know how long I stared at those feet, but it felt like forever. I turned my head to look up at the face attached to the feet. What looked back at me were the pale eyes, with the mouth agape in a stubborn position like nothing was happening. His head, his fingers locked at the joints just like before I leapt back. I should have zipped the tent back up. Not like a tent flap could stop anyone, though. But it's when flapping the tent door open and closed, I could see him just standing there. Eventually, he walked away, rocks scraping underneath his dragging feet, until it was only the sound of the nylon tent flapping, whipping back and forth. I know I wasn't sleeping this time. I was awake, moving, feeling everything around me, and I never fell back to sleep. I kept my lamp on, my head lamp strapped to my head until the sunlight broke the horizon. With that cautiously, I left the safety of my thin tent, packed up my stuff, and made my way to the trail. Next to my tent, I could see the tracks left by the rocks that scraped with its dragging gait. For context, this happened when I was 13, so it would have been 2004. I'm half Puerto Rican, and my family often visited relatives in Puerto Rico during the holidays back then. At that time, we stayed with an uncle in Vizquez, a small island off the east coast of Puerto Rico. He had a beautiful house on a hillside with a small fenced area he had with goats. I loved staying there. It was high enough that I could see the open ranch land further down that harbored wild horses and a few herds of cattle before it would drop off at a cliffside beach. There were tons of large rocks and trees for me to climb as well. My older brother would have been 19 at the time. While my mom and I shared one room, he got a room to himself, and he has always been the type to sneak out to go exploring. So we went out one night. Not that I or my mother knew, however, I remember waking up because I could hear the goats outside. Normally they'd be sleeping, but they sounded a little anxious. The sound scared me, but not nearly as much as the other sound I heard. There was a growling sound near the window. The window was open but barred, pretty common for a lot of Puerto Rican homes to allow ventilation while not compromising security, plus protecting against flying debris during hurricanes. We were on the second story of the house. I wasn't exactly scared because I was worried whatever it would would get to me, because it couldn't, but more that I couldn't pinpoint it. I've always been a bit of an animal nerd. I watch tons of Animal Planet and National Geographic, and I love hearing animal vocalizations, but the growl I was hearing sounded foreign. It's hard to describe. I know the sounds wild cats make, and I know that various sounds that canines make. I've heard the various strange vocalizations that foxes make. This was definitely not a bear either. Plus, I already knew there are no bears native to Puerto Rico. Actually, now that I really think about it, it sounded like a mix between a person growling and gargling. I didn't want to wake my mother, who was in a dead sleep, but I slipped out of bed and started to go to the window. But halfway to it, I suddenly froze. I just got this weird feeling that washed over me, and this thought entered my head: don't look. Like I had this feeling that I would see something that would mess me up mentally or something, like I wouldn't be able to handle it. I went back to bed, still feeling uneasy, and stayed up a bit. The ground eventually seemed to drift away, and I fell asleep at some point. The next day, we found out one of the goats got attacked by something. It wasn't a gory attack. In fact, the goat was just laying there with a bite mark on the jugular. Being barely any blood spill was pretty weird. My brother also seemed uneasy that day, and he really seems bothered by stuff. I told him I think I heard what killed the goats last night, and how weird it sounded. He decided to tell me he snuck out that night. Basically, he told me he snuck out and went to the pastures where the wild horses and cows were. He said that while he was out in the field, he heard the cows become restless and panic. When he started to feel them stampede, he ran down a sort of ditch that had a large tree in it. He only had a small flashlight with him, and it was much darker in this ditch. He claimed he saw what he thought was a person standing behind the trunk of the tree, but when he pointed his light towards them, they moved out of view further behind it. He said he kept distance, but moved around the trunk and tried to see if he could see them, but no one was there. Then he felt like he was being watched and had to find his way through the dark back home. He didn't want to sneak out anymore after that, at least not in the countryside. He actually brought me to the exact spot during the day. The ditch was pretty mucky and damp compared to the fields higher up out of it that are dry grasslands. Most of the ditch seemed like mostly mud and maybe clay. I could see various hoof prints from cows and horses in the mud. Probably came down in the ditch and under the tree to have shade and get cooled down. Our footprints were distinguished in the mud too, and a few large dog prints. Oddly enough, there's no native wild dog population in Puerto Rico. There is a large amount of feral dogs, so it's possible some wandered into the ditch too. My brother described the figure. He said he couldn't make out any hair or distinguish any clothes on them, but they looked like they were hunched over, maybe crouched near the ground, facing away from him, on the other side of the trunk of the tree. He only catch the briefest glimpse before it pulled away after the light showed up on them. They just seemed to disappear. I didn't see any whatever human footprints or shoe prints or anything crazy weird. My brother's voice was shaking when he told me the story. I asked him if he remembered the night a few years ago, because part of me, especially older me, is a little skeptical. After all, my brother used to try to scare me all the time as a kid, but lies are often hard to keep track of, so I asked what he remembered. He told me the exact same story, in exact clarity, and was still as shaky as he retold it. He didn't add anything to the story either, which is usually something he does when he's making stuff up. I don't know what he saw, I don't know what I heard, I don't know what killed the goat. There's a part of me that thinks chupacabra. The original descriptions of the chupacabra from eyewitnesses don't describe the canine version, but turned out to be mini coy wolf hybrids. Puerto Ricans have always described something that looked more alien when it comes to the version of the chupacabra, but again, I don't know what to think. I'll just never forget the feeling I got that told me not to look out that window. Part of me wishes I had anyway, but maybe I wouldn't have been able to handle it at 13.